Hello, friends. Welcome to Magic, Creativity, and Life. Interesting conversations with interesting people. My name is Thorn Coyle, and I am your host. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to my Patreon supporters for paying for the recording and captioning of this series. Let's dive in. Welcome to Magic, Creativity, and Life. My name is Thorn Coyle, and today I'm speaking with Rashunda Tramble, who is a writer, tarot reader, and co-author of the Numinous Tarot Guide, A New Way to Read the Cards. With over 25 years of tarot experience, she offers professional readings through her website, Rashunda.com. She is based near Lugano, Switzerland. She holds a BA in film production from the University of Memphis and an MA in creative media practice from Bournemouth University. Rashunda is also a member of Mensa and a Reiki practitioner. She has worked in radio and television in the U.S. and marketing and communications in Europe. She was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. Rashunda, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Thorn. Thanks so much for the invitation. Really looking forward to how our conversation will go.
So I came across your work on Instagram, and I really love your energy and your presence and the way you talk about the cards and practice. So I really wanted to have you on because I think my listeners would enjoy your wisdom, quite frankly. But I'd like to start by asking all my guests, what are your creative roots? As a creative person, what are some of your earliest forms of creative expression?
Can I be very honest with you?
Please.
I don't consider myself a creative person. I just consider myself. And when I encounter people who really say, I'm a creative, that I get the willies.
Why is that?
I really get the willies because most of the creative, like the really quote unquote creative people that I've met that I see as creative, they've just been doing their thing. They've just been trying to find a way to express themselves. Mm-hmm. And they don't label themselves as a creative. It's more of, they just say, I'm just doing my thing. I don't know if it's creative. I don't know if it's not. This is just how I express myself. Mm-hmm. And even when I was a kid, people would say, okay, she's creative, but for me, it wasn't creative. It was more of just a matter of being able to communicate in a particular way and surviving.
Right.
So I rarely consider myself or self-identify as a creative. And I think also, since I've worked in the art world and there are so many people that label themselves as creative, and by being creative, it's almost like it gives them carte blanche to act like buttholes.
Right.
Well, right. That's the other thing. It's like, well, I do this because I'm a creative and, I don't need to follow your guidelines because I'm a creative. And I think that's also the thing too. There are so many people who use the word or term themselves as a creative to as an excuse to behave badly.
Yes. I think we've all seen that and encountered that. And it's unfortunate.
So I didn't mean to screw up. Yeah, I didn't mean to screw up and that's why, even before I wanted to give you a heads up, but I was like, let's just see how this goes. But yeah, I mean, maybe what is creative within the realm of like the podcast, since the title is creative, but what are the talking points of a creative? And then maybe I can follow those.
I actually love, though, Rashunda, that you said you're just doing your thing. You're trying to communicate and trying to survive, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think that is true for a lot of people. And I think it's true for all forms of creativity, whether that's gardening, making music, painting, dancing, writing books, whatever, right? Even divination can be a creative art form because it's a form of communication. Creativity to me also is how we tap into life force, right? Because the cosmos is creative. The cosmos also is destructive, right? Because it's all a cycle. So as we're trying to communicate with each other in this cosmos, for me, that's what creativity is about.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you have to label yourself as a creative. But I also do think that you are creative. Clearly,
Okay.
clearly to me, you're a creative human being. You write, you read, you used to work in film, right?
Well, TV. Yeah, TV.
TV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, those are all creative pursuits. Even the building of an altar can be considered creative. It's other things as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I have an expansive definition of creativity, which is one reason I love having these conversations, because everyone approaches it slightly differently. And I actually love that you, in effect, are rejecting the word creative, as for me, it sounds like a form of ego balancing. You don't want to get caught up in an inflated sense of self by calling yourself a creative, because some people do that. You're correct.
Yeah.
So those are just some of my thoughts on the
Mm-hmm.
topic. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any response to that?
I think you're right. I think it's, I honor that definition of creative. And yeah, I think that works if that's how how you call a creative person. I also, in that same vein, I personally would expand that definition of being creative. I think someone who works in the fields is creative. If you are a farmer, if you grow food, that is creative. That is a way, that is your love letter to the world and to nature. And that's creative. That is creation.
Right.
So I think that we can also expand that beyond the arts, beyond
Yes.
the writing, beyond that, we can open that up. For example, I used to get my hair braided, and the person braiding my hair, I was like, you are a creative with what you can do. My barber is creative. So I think, in the way you're framing being a creative, those edges are very flexible.
Yes.
And I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and, going back to communication, right? Some forms of braiding were literally forms of communication,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Some forms of knitting, right, were literally forms of communication. There were
Exactly.
letters and it written into the patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
So humans, to me, have always created and always will create in many forms and in whatever conditions we find ourselves in. And that includes creative forms of thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I approach this work task? How do I approach this math problem? Children are very creative thinkers. First of all, their imaginations haven't been stunted yet by social expectations, hopefully. And second, they're learning the world. And as you said, trying to communicate, trying to connect. Well, how do I do that? Well, what if I try this? What if I try this other thing? Right? That's a form of creativity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Experimentation. So I'm wondering how experimentation marries with skill, practice, and experience for you in something like reading tarot.
Mm-hmm. I think it is, I'll put it like this. If I read for someone, or when I read for someone, it's a balance between skill and experience, my experience that I bring in, and the experience of the person I'm reading for. But also there is this element of experimentation, because every reading has a different context.
Right.
And, depending on what the person brings into the reading, you have to experiment with some of the meanings. Now, I'm not saying toss all of the tarot
Yes.
meanings out. It's not about that. I'll even give an example of one uh, I just had a session with where where the temperance card came up, and I'm not going to share anything identifiable, but the temperance card and how we experimented in the reading was that the person, when we had the conversation, and the person identified as the angel on the normal Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, but in the angel in temperance is about balance, but also sort of an alchemy. And this person was very talented, had a lot going for them, and they were the angel, and they were doing so many things, and they were making this magic and making alchemy. But if you think about the Rider-Waite-Smith version of this deck, of the card, the angel's back is to a path.
Right.
And that path is leading to the sun. You can see the sunrise over it. So the experimentation that we got into was, are you doing so much and trying so much to make magic right now for everybody else that you've turned your back on your true path?
That's beautiful.
That's what because the sun is back there. That's your purpose. And that path is leading to your purpose, because normally, the sun can represent purpose or stepping into the spotlight. And that's experimentation in tarot. But you have to know what you're doing. You have to know the card to be able to do that. That's not something that a person, I shouldn't say this, but I will, that a person who just picked up a deck, 6 months ago and decides to go pro, that's a hard thing to do, to sort of massage and experiment with a card in that way. Maybe there are some gifted people out there that can do it, but it's kind of rare. You have to have, or at least I believe you need some years of experience behind you reading tarot to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true for many art forms and science forms. You need to know the rules before you break the rules, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have to have a grounding and a foundation in order to fly. And yes, we use our intuition, but when our intuition is grounded in the years of study and experience you're talking about, our intuition becomes stronger and more accurate, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's it becomes more accurate. It is grounded. And just to be practical, if someone asks, okay, why did you interpret the card that way? You have enough you have enough knowledge, as you can say, I understand why you're asking that, because normally this card is blah 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 blah, but here is the reason why, in the context of your spread, we can give it some room, we can experiment. And then they go, okay. So yeah.
So do you consider, when you do a reading with someone, that the reading itself is a co-creation with the person you're reading for?
Absolutely.
And then do you also call upon, do you have any I know some readers formally call upon their own inner voice, their inner wisdom. Some readers call upon ancestors or gods and goddesses or spirits that they work with. And however much you want to share about your process is fine, including nothing. But I'm wondering if that co-creation extends beyond the reading and the person you're reading for.
Yeah, I do a ritual before I do a reading. I call a quarters. I cast a circle by the earth that is her body, by the air that is her breath, by the fire that is her quickening spirit, and by the waters of her teeming womb. I do that. Mm-hmm. And then I call on the guardians, and then I say, okay, let's roll. And that's about it.
Yeah.
That's about it. That's what I do. I just ask, okay, I am, I'll just ask and say, I'm opening myself up to any messages that may come through. And then if that person, wants to, I don't do it with them, but if, they inform me that, they do ancestor work, I said, okay, let's invite the ancestors in. One thing I will say, when I first, I guess you could say, decades ago, I was, I identified as pagan. Mm-hmm. And during that time, I was very much into ritual and doing things that are, just everything. I had all the accoutrements. I still have, things in a little box in my chest. And I did the whole thing. But now I don't use an athame. I don't use all of those things anymore. I just have my own personal way of doing a ritual or doing a preparation that that works for me.
Mm-hmm. I think that happens for many people also. Some people continue to use the tools they trained in forever, right, till they die.
Yeah.
And other people incorporate and internalize, I think, the external structures and leave them aside, which is another thing. When I was teaching all the time, I would say to my students, try this for 6 months to a year, then decide whether it's useful to you or not, right? Because oftentimes we try something and then our personality or our ego rejects it as too difficult or not useful before we've had time to even taste it, let alone incorporate it. But what you're talking about is, again, years of practice, years of training, and then realizing, oh no, here's what feels natural to me now. And mostly that's because you've incorporated things, I think. Which is it's going back to the years of training and skill, giving a foundation for your intuition and this new dialogue you have with practice and with the cards that you use.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I like the word dialogue. It is a dialogue. It's creating a dialogue with the cards, blending in the practice. Yeah, I like that.
Good.
If I may say.
I'm glad. So do you consider what you do to be a form of magic, or does that word not have meaning to you?
I consider it maybe everyday magic. It's not high magic. It's not all of the, the things that other people may practice, but I believe in making magic just in a particular, just a very, I don't want to call it boring. It's not a boring way. It is a very practical way. I believe in practical magic. I remember a conversation I had with my mom, who was Southern Baptist. And, being from Memphis, there is a quote unquote hoodoo element or a thread going through everything. But, people don't say, oh, I practice hoodoo. They don't normally do that where I'm from.
Right.
But I remember letting Mom read some of the books I had on magic or hoodoo or whatever. And at one point, she flipped through one hoodoo book and she came into the living room and she threw it at me. And I said, why'd you do that? She did it playfully. And she said, why do they make things so complicated? Why are they making this? Yeah, she said, these books, they make things so complicated that, whatever you do, whatever practice it is, it doesn't have to be that damn complicated. I mean, she said that to me. And I believe that. I think sometimes, even if I must say, all respect to my teachers, and I don't have an issue with any of my teachers because they, the ones I had, I consider they were pretty good. And they were like, look, expand, mold, make this your particular way. But you do have some folks that I believe make things so freaking complicated and difficult to understand so that you're dependent on them.
Oh, interesting.
And so that's just my belief. Yeah.
It becomes a form of gatekeeping.
Yeah. Whatever the term that is being used now, it's gatekeeping. And I think, in terms of magic, in my opinion, if it's too complicated, if you have to do all of this stuff or whatever and hop over, so many different things, and you have to go buy different things and all of that, then I'm like, nah, that's not the magic you, that I believe I practice. No.
Mhm. Mhm.
I like simple. Um, if I do use something as part of a ritual, and my rituals are not, if I do a ritual, it's definitely not elaborate at all. It's something that can be found at home. It's something that can be in the kitchen, or I go out in the backyard, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, this brings me back to the earlier part of our conversation, which I'm going to thread forward in a moment. First, I want to say, I think some of those elaborate practices, yes, they can be, a form of keeping people out or keeping control over people. But in other ways, they can be training wheels. They can be a helpful container while we're learning, right? So they set a template for us that we can follow and then eventually deviate from, right? So it goes back to, not only reading tarot strictly by intuition right out of the gate, right? You need to study, you need to learn why these symbols are there, what the symbols mean classically, what other people have interpreted the symbols to be. And then over time, as you develop your own relationship with the card, your intuition can come through more strongly. And for me, it's magic and ritual and really any spiritual practice. It doesn't matter what tradition, it's similar, right? I want the container at first. I want the tools. I want to have to study so that I build my own structure before I go off on my own, right? So there has to be, for me, some balance between the two. You know, I used to, one of my teachers, Cora Anderson, there's a water cleansing rite we do in fairy tradition, and I was taught a more elaborate step-by-step version so that I could get all my parts in alignment and, make sure what I wanted to get clarity on. Cora would just say, "Can I have a glass of water?" And she'd just hold her hand over the glass of water for a moment and then drink it.
Exactly. And
Right.
she would also, yeah. And also with the knife, she said that, she used a knife. She was cutting vegetables. And I think
Yes.
someone was asking, why are you using this knife? And she said, oh, I'm blessing the vegetables. It was like, yeah.
Yes.
I love
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. She cooked for hospitals for years, and she would say people always knew when it was her day off because the soup didn't taste right.
Right. Yes.
Because that was her magic, and she was very clear that that was her magic, right? And, she had the whole folk tradition background. So what I would tell my students was, yes, when you've been practicing for a few more years, adapt this process. But right now, I need you just to stick with the structure for a little bit, until you learn it and incorporate some things. I'm not going to let you leap to what Cora knows, because Cora's life is different than your life, right? So again, I just find there's a balancing act, both in my personal practice and in how I have related magic work to other people, right? And so in my own personal practice, when I'm learning something new, it's the same with writing fiction. When I decided to try to write fiction again after many years away, I went to study. I was like, okay, you've been writing fiction for decades. What can you teach me? And then I was like, okay, now I've learned a bunch and incorporated a bunch. Now I just need to do my own practice. So I'm agreeing with you that
Right.
yes, I think things can be very simple, and I think things can be overcomplicated. And where's the balance between training and incorporating and digesting something and then coming up with our own way that's simpler?
Right. I think also I need to let me interject something in there because I do understand what you're saying. The only thing is sometimes we make an assumption that that group work or that teacher or they have someone that's available. I did not have, I mean, I did do some training, um, uh, but I'm in Switzerland.
Yes.
I've been here for 20 years.
Right.
So in terms of having a teacher, I had teachers. I had to fly to the UK to work with them. But I did not have immediate access. And I mean, this is way before, I mean, yeah, there was the internet, but not like it is now.
No,
But
it's a
it's
different
completely
beast.
different now. So I mean, that was the other thing too, that, when I identified as a pagan and I, made it here to Switzerland, I had to sort of put together a practice on my own. Yes,
Hmm.
there were, of course, there were traditions that I identified with. I ordered all the books,
Hmm.
even yours.
Right.
Evolutionary witchcraft. That was my, I used that, and because that's all I had.
Right.
And so it got to the point where I said, okay, maybe this is how I should be doing things. Let me put something together. And I made it work for me. Luckily, it seems like I didn't break too many rules or anything like that. But, and, not everyone, at least when I was coming up, had that type of access where they had someone like
Right.
you, Torn, immediately, in immediate, uh, they can call or go over their house, or living in California where they can just say, "Hey, can we meet and talk about things?" So that's the other thing too, on the other side of it. Not everyone has the access to a teacher.
Yes. Yes. That is true. So, how did you learn tarot? What was that process like for you?
Actually, I started reading when I was a reporter for a television station. And what happened was there was a person I was supposed to do a story on, and they would not let me do the story on them until until I allowed them to do cards for me.
Wow.
And that's what happened. And so um I was I was always open to spirituality and the occult anyway, but I was skeptical. I was like this, on the one side I was like, okay, this is cool, but on the other side I was a skeptic. But the way this person read my cards, I said, "Oh, okay, I can identify with this. I can get with this." And I started from there. And that was
Hmm.
about, I've been saying 25 years ago for a long time. So it's probably
Yes.
30 years ago. Yeah, I've been saying 25 years for like 5 years. I mean,
Yes.
no, I mean, like for a long time. And that's how I started reading tarot. And then I, gosh, just found the books that I could find. When I moved here to Switzerland, I became a member of the Tarot Association of the British Isles. I
Hmm.
learned through them. I connected with Katrina Wynn, who is also a tarot reader. I had the good fortune to meet Rachel Pollack at
Oh.
yeah at different conferences here in Europe. So that's how I learned.
Hmm.
And then just whatever book I could get hold of, I got hold of it and just went from there. So that's sort of how I started. That's how I learned.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
again, that was decades ago.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then since then, you've obviously continued to study and formed your own
Oh
relationship
yeah.
with the cards, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, is
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I can't remember what I was going to say, so that's fine.
Oh,
Go ahead.
is the Smith Waite deck your favorite deck? What kind of decks do you use?
Phew. It really depends. I mean, mostly in terms of reading for people, I will do the quote unquote traditional Rider Waite Smith, or some type of deck that is based on a Rider Waite Smith, because that's the most popular and people know. People usually know that one.
Yeah.
I can read with Marseille. I learned Marseille when I moved here to Europe, And, off and on, I read for myself with the Thoth deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it really, in terms of the favorite way, or how I, you know, like which deck is a favorite, it just really depends. When I read for myself, I rotate.
Mm-hmm. What do you like best about reading?
For myself or for others?
Either.
Well, in a nutshell, the ability to find out why and to put together a story that helps your subconscious, that helps the whatever is going on inside of you be able to understand the why. That's what I really like about it.
Mm-hmm.
You may not know what the hell's going on, but when you put the cards down in front of you, you go, "Ah, okay, that's why I'm doing that. That's what I need to do." Sometimes I think what happens is we've got so much stuff going on outside that we have to deal with, that we don't give ourselves a chance to talk to ourselves, to communicate with ourselves. And tarot is just a way to do it. You can do it with other things too, like chicken bones, dice, whatever. It's more about creating this really special vessel or bubble, or just a time frame, just giving yourself 30 minutes to an hour to say, okay, I am going to focus on this conversation, or have a conversation with myself, and see what happens, or how these cards, or whatever I use, how they prompt the conversation, how they move the conversation forward.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I like about it.
I love that. Because to me, all of my creativity taps my subconscious, right? That's what being in the flow is for me. It's my subconscious gets a chance to move forward in ways that I don't always allow it to. And that's certainly true for divination forms for me. And then I have other practices that help me access that state too. And I'm wondering, I know you do Reiki and other things. Are there other practices that help you connect with your subconscious, including like exercise, walking, meditation, anything like that?
Meditation is mostly what I use. I try to meditate at least for 10 minutes every day in the morning, if I have time. If not, 5 minutes. If not that, I try to incorporate meditation, or a meditation, into something that I'm doing during the day, whether it's drinking a cup of tea, whether it is, washing dishes. It's very Thich Nhat Hanh, what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also meditate every morning, and then I tune into that throughout the day at various times a day. And in some phases of my life, I make sure to also bookend that in the evening, even if it's just, again, for 5 minutes in the evening, just to recenter myself, give thanks, and take a few slow breaths, right, before I wind down.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a heartbeat throughout the day, though, if I set that template in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I feel I have greater access to intuition and my subconscious, which is helpful.
Yes. And that's why I do it. The meditation sort of in the morning, it helps set the stage, and it helps you prepare for, what may happen. Also, your breath, in breath and out breath. I depend on my breath quite a bit to bring me back to center.
Yes.
One thing in the Plum Village tradition, which is the tradition that Thich Nhat Hanh founded, you rely a lot on the sound of the bell. And you use the bell to check in with your breath and to bring yourself back to center. And I'm lucky enough to live in a very small village that has a church. They have them all around the place here in Switzerland. And so every, when at the top of the hour, we hear a bell. And that's my signal to, okay, let me check in with my breath. Let's get back to center. and go from there. So that's also part of my practice.
That's beautiful. Wow, what a gift.
Yeah, that's a gift.
That's wonderful. How often, I'm switching gears slightly, how often do you write? Is that a regular practice, or is that just a when I have something I want to say practice? What's that like for you?
Well, I write for my blog every month. I mean, I have something new on there every month. Whoever's listening, please check out my blog, rashunda.com, under writing.
It's full, I mean, your blog is full of amazing wisdom and different takes on things, and yeah, a lot of great food for thought.
Uh-huh. And that's what I do. I mean, I write, I try to write something every couple of days, just like either have it in draft and get it ready. But every month I try to have a new article or a new spread or something on my blog for people to, to offer to people.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's a steady thing, but not necessarily a daily thing.
It is a steady thing. It's not daily. It is monthly. If you visit right now and say, okay, I'll come back in a month, in another month, you'll see something else. You'll see something new, hopefully. If it's not that, it's something that I've ported over from YouTube. But yeah, I try to write. I make that a habit.
Great.
Yeah, but I've been doing that for all my life. So it's just that right now I write about tarot.
Right. And so you used to write different things.
Well, I was a journalist.
Yeah.
And so that was part of my job. I was a journalist. I was also marketing and communication. So I would write for other people, other topics, other things, and write on a daily basis for whatever shop I was working for. And now I write for myself.
Beautiful. Do you currently have cards that are speaking more loudly to you?
Honestly, it really depends. I pull a card. When I write on my blog, I do something with a card that is connected to the astro season that we're in, but I also pull a card just to pull a card. And so for this month, when we are recording, we're recording this, the card of the month is the Seven of Swords. And that speaks to me because in the way I interpret it is, normally the Seven of Swords can be about someone trying to get away with something, or maybe there is some type of untruth or someone trying to pull something over another person's eyes. But the way I interpreted it for this time is, you may need some cloak and dagger action to do what you need to do. Don't tell everybody your business. For example, if you are sending out resumes to get another job because you are in a crappy job, don't tell everybody.
Right.
Do it undercover. Don't tell your colleagues that you're doing that. And that's also how I interpret the Seven of Swords. And that's sort of, I guess that's speaking to me now because that's what I pulled for this month.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so we are recording this near the end of September. It probably won't go out till October, but you just pulled for the equinox justice. And I appreciated what you had to say about justice too, because it's what I wrote about the equinox also. It's internal balance, right? It's not just the external forms. So I appreciated your take on that too, which also seems very seasonal, right?
It is seasonal because you're probably referring to, I just posted something today on Instagram about the Justice card and the fact that, at least in the Rider-Waite-Smith version, we focus so much on the scales.
Yes.
Because it's Libra season, it's about balance, it's about the scales, it's about, all of these Libra qualities that we try to merge with the Justice card, but we forget that the Justice card has a sword.
Yes.
And sometimes we are trying so hard to, balance things externally that we are throwing ourselves off balance internally. And we may need to use that sword to just cut some dead weight.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to balance things externally, get rid of some things so we can be balanced internally.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I'm working on.
Yeah, we need all of our tools.
Exactly. We do. We do.
Yeah, to do this work. I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The last thing I want to say before I ask a final question is, some of us are doing a lot of work right now with the star card to invoke hope into the world right now. And, I've been doing work with Laura Tempest Zekroff came to me a year and a half or so ago and said, "Hey, do you want to do this work with me for a year?" And I was like, "Yes, that sounds like really useful work," because at the time, a lot of people were mired in hopelessness or despair or overwhelm, right? And so working with the star this last year will complete the cycle in January, has been very healing to meditate on that every day while working through the rest of the major arcana. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about cards that can help guide us through this moment.
I wouldn't say like there's one particular card for everybody. I think it depends on the person. I think it is very, very personal. My quote unquote birth card, whatever, it depends on what you call it when you add up your year, month, and day numbers. It's the Hierophant. And so I use my personal card to find hope or something to think about. And so I think it depends on the person.
I think that's a good answer. Yeah, my card is the Hermit, and I return to that over and over again in my life. It's like, how much am I spending that time in my cave to regenerate, and how much am I holding up that lantern for other people?
Exactly.
Right. Because sometimes I hold the lantern for too much and too long, and wow, my arm is getting tired. And am I paying attention to that, or am I spending too much time in the cave?
Right.
And right. I need to shine the light a little more. So thanks for that. That's a great piece of wisdom, I think, that a lot of us can carry forward.
Well, you're welcome. Glad to offer it.
And then you already touched on this a bit when talking about reading, but do you have a relationship currently or a thought about what your why is? What your purpose is in this moment? And it can be small or large.
Yeah, I mean, in this moment, because it changes. I don't think your purpose stays the same. I think my personal purpose is to really become comfortable with what I'm doing. I think that's my purpose. Become comfortable with getting back on social media, but also become comfortable with what I'm doing, and also setting boundaries and not being as becoming comfortable with the fact that I may not fit. That's what it is. I can't be everything for everyone, and I don't want to be everything for everyone. I'm not going to fit everything. I will never be this like an influencer-y type on social media. And I think that was one of the mistakes that I made before, where I was trying to, okay, I see these other people doing this. Let me go ahead and do the same thing. Let me try this. Let me try that. And when I finally said to myself, you know what, I just got to be me. It doesn't matter that, I don't have so many followers. But, I'm just going to be me and do what I need to do. And that's it. And I think that's my purpose now. Do what I need to do.
I love that. I've certainly gone through that myself, of just realizing I needed to embrace my weird. And in doing that and being more myself, the people who resonate will find me, and then I can hopefully resonate with them too.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is refreshing and also a relief to not be everything for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And those are the times we're living in too, right? There's a proliferation of so many different things happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate that. I think it's a very fertile time right now. And I love watching everyone doing their own thing and then sharing that with the people that respond. So I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to close our conversation, and I want to thank you again for joining me and thank all our listeners. And my name is T. Thorn Coyle, and you can find me at thorncoyle.com. And you can find Rashunda at rashunda.com, and that's RASHUNDA.com. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And if you would like to support this series and future podcasts, please join me at patreon.com/thorncoyle. That's THORNCOYLE. Have a creative and magical day.